Ahoy! If you've closely followed my videos over the past days, then much of what you may have heard in the dev talk was repetition. Fortunately, not all of it was, and we still got quite a few news, and that is exactly what we're focusing on in this video. We're going to talk about the actual news that were announced in the dev talk, as well as some of the things they showed us that we hadn't seen before. When it comes to mounts, they mostly confirmed what we already knew, but they did show us a little bit of the quest line, and they also showed us a tiny bit of how the races will look like. Just some very quick clips here, nothing super major. For leveling, we learned that by the end of the main story quest, we should reach level 65. When it comes to crafting, it seems like Dave dropped yet another hint, thanks to Pinnacle High for pointing this out to me. So he kind of misspeaks, quote unquote, when he talks about the prismatic scarabs, saying something that sounds like prismatic crimson first. Of course, this could have just been an internal working title, but I have a feeling it might hint at a new material or something. How exactly that will play into the whole scarab process is something that I'll leave up for speculation for now. When it comes to the Flail, we get a tiny bit of extra information. So in general, the weapon will be more about support and assisting allies than raw damage. The left tree will be for healing, debuffing and buffing, whereas the right tree will be for tanking and survivability, as well as survivability for your allies. This is the first animated weapon, and such that it has its own animation within the weapon with a chain, and it has kind of a quote-unquote ranged melee. I don't know if this range will actually be longer than, for example, a greatsword. When it comes to the artifacts, we get an example of what the artifacts will look like. Keep in mind that this is very likely a placeholder. I doubt any of these things are actually in the game in this exact way. But what you can see here is that you have this slightly different glow, you have 700 gear score, you have the magnify effect, which scales with your highest attribute, so currently, in this case, that is dexterity, and therefore this turns into 32 dexterity. The perk on this is Shrug Off. Non-crowd controlling debuffs expire 20% faster on you. Wouldn't exactly be massively game-changing, again, might just be a filler though, and the task here is a bunch of kill different enemies in the Elysian wilds. And afterwards you have to craft the headband upgrade itself. It's also interesting that next to the gear in your inventory you can see a little icon that tells you that you currently have missions going on with this. And again, to emphasize that this is just a filler artifact, the description is literally an artifact of immense power. We also get a quick glance at the new inventory screen, which has a slightly different layout, which looks a little bit cleaner overall. You can see that the gathering is now in its own category, and the mounts obviously in their own category as well. What I don't really like is the consumables being on the left. I think they should be on the right, so you can quickly drag things into that. You also notice the new Heartrune here, Primal Fury. By the way, just in case you're wondering, the bottom right consumable is not a new item, that's Artisan's Flatbread. When it comes to expeditions, we get some pretty relevant new information. So we get the confirmation that regular expeditions will in fact be exponentially easier. They will in fact be labeled as story mode in-game. But, quote, it gets pretty hard after that. M1 is not hard yet. It's described as my first mutation. And you can do it right away after the main story quest, so this is a very easy way into M1. They didn't really say anything about M2, but then they say that M3 pushes the current boundaries, and they made it challenging, and once again it sounds very much like they're aiming to make it harder than M10. But it seems like they're doing exactly what I was hoping for, and making it so that for farming and for pugs you may not necessarily need to go for M3. They say you will get good rewards across all mutations, not the story mode, all mutations. But you will get good rewards at a slightly quicker pace at M3, but this isn't a huge deal according to them. We also need to keep in mind that umbral shards are not in the picture anymore, so there's no highest number of umbral shards to reach in the mutations. As such, I wouldn't be surprised, again, if many people will try and farm items on M2, especially with pugs, whereas M3 becomes more something for the dedicated grinders that want to go in it for the challenge. They said that their goal is to make people more used to expeditions by essentially lowering the entry barrier and have more people run mutations faster. They rather said that you will run mutations faster, but I'm assuming that implies that you simply find groups faster, because I don't think they're changing the speed of most mutations. Quick self-sponsor, I posted a bunch of trading tips for the expansion on my Patreon. If you want to get your trades in early before I make a video about that, then consider supporting me there. Next up, the Elysian Wilds, the new zone. So, First Light is grown over, it's a bit of an alien atmosphere now, they say. But the interesting part with this zone is that parts of First Light remain under it. And you will kind of have certain story aspects that play into that too. Like, for example, the cow from First Light is somehow still in the story. Generally, the atmosphere in the zone is supposed to be very different because you're the invader in the zone. This means that more than just creatures are out to get you. There are tons of new enemies. For example, there are mushrooms that attack you. There are exploding sprouts. There are beetles that you can squish like scorpions. There are armored dragons, mammoth, so-called Heartrunes, which are various different creatures that are a mix of human and animal, which are lore-wise explained by them dying close together and then being resurrected probably with the arrival of Artemis. Within this category of new creatures, there are boars, crows, reindeer, rats, and bunnies with a bunny surprise. They didn't tell us what the surprise is though. What makes this even cooler is that the entire zone glows at night, and I remember one of the articles mentioning that even the creatures glow at night. And I want to show you a quick clip here that I recorded when I first went to the Sealed Off First Light, where the glow just looked really cool at night. You can imagine that looking even better if the entire zone has this glow to it and the mobs in it do too. Also, when it comes to the beast lords, it seems like the trailer isn't quite telling us the whole story. Because they're kind of portrayed as pure enemies initially, but it seems like you can talk to them and actually maybe convince them of your case. Or who knows, maybe whatever you say will just anger them more, we'll find out. Quick spoiler warning, I'm gonna show you a clip here that was kind of at the end of the mob video on another website. This clip likely shows the final boss of the main story, so if you don't want to see that, there are timestamps on this video, so you can just skip ahead to the next timestamp. If you want to see it, I'll show it in 3, 2, 1. Remember how that one NPC outside of First Light said something about a Gorgon, and I said, that's gotta be Medusa? Well, here she is in all her glory, and you can already see a ton of people behind her that are just turned into stone, so this should be a very interesting fight. On the topic of interesting things, there's something that seems to at least, maybe, hopefully get a little bit more interesting. There are 2 new major elite chest runs, and 2 elite overlords that were introduced in Brimstone. I don't know what that's supposed to mean. I think maybe this is something like Capri's Arena, so just some areas with overlords that you need to kill, and then you get a lot of elite chests quickly, maybe. But these 2 elite chest runs will be very beast themed, and they also specifically mentioned that there's a new resource in the zone, which are bananas. Not quite sure where they mentioned that in the context of ECRs. The first chest run is Isle of Zervan, which is a large open area designed for mounts, and you climb up some form of puzzle with magical bridges. In order to activate some of these magical bridges, you need to commune with the beast lords first, and then you can let others go over as well. So it's kind of like the runes in Brimstone Sands, but I think at least a little bit more interesting. At the top you'll find some giant lions. The other chest run will be in the south, a Tribunal High Mount. There's a larger variety of creatures here, for example chameleons that can go invisible, and then you have to find them if they die and you want to skin them. Also there are ancient runes here, and you kind of pop out next to the expedition entrance. You may remember when they first talked about Brimstone, they mentioned something about having 3 zones in one zone. I am not sure if this is that, because it does sound like the areas are very different, but I'm not sure if they actually went with this concept that they originally said they wanted to do, where they have them like as essentially almost separate zones. There's also a general new thing going on throughout the entire zone, which is called the Secret of the Spores, calling it a new game-ish mode. You need to find a certain NPC and he helps you get a bottle, and you can put things into this bottle, which is spore pods that you can collect throughout the zones, for example. With what you collected, you can then make potions. These potions help you survive the Elysian wilds, allow you to do more damage to mobs, I think, and get more loot, so it's quite rewarding to do this. In a way, I think this will strongly reward you for exploring the new zone and actually doing the quest line instead of trying to just rush specific things, because then you don't get all the benefits that people that have upgraded their bottle have. For example, there's a new affliction called Drenched if you walk too close to Spores, which increases the damage you take by 25%, at least for now, maybe they adjust these values, unless you have a potion on you. There's also another new effect, which is Rage Miasma, which comes from mushrooms, which makes mobs that normally wouldn't attack you, and gives nearby beasts more damage as well. Again, this zone has it out for you. The new expedition is the Savage Divide. Within this expedition, the goal is for all areas to feel different from each other. They kind of compared it to a zoo. The bosses have very cool, unique mechanics that players have not seen before, and one of them is a mammoth boss, the other one is a gorilla. Both the devs as well as some journalists say that these are probably the hardest expedition bosses yet. I'm assuming they're not referring to story mode difficulty here though. The Primal Fury Heartrune drops here as well. Speaking of the Primal Fury Heartrune, we get some extra details. The brutal version of this will allow you to deal more damage, but in return you also take more damage, so it's a full berserk, and you extend the duration of the Heartrune by doing damage. On the other hand, the Stalwart version will allow you to take less damage while in the Primal Fury mode, while you also deal less damage, and if you take damage, that extends the duration instead. But what's surely much more important for most of you to know is that while you're in this double-sized mode, while you're berserking, you can use emotes, and you can also use your inventory, so the meme potential is immense. Those are the expansion parts. There's also new info about the Season 3 stuff. There will be a new reward track for Season 3, and the main story quests for Great Cleave and Edengrove are updated. In Great Cleave, Thorpe is just trying to take over the zone, whereas Edengrove gets some more significant changes too. As I've already told you, this is now an ownable territory. It'll have its own full settlement, and it'll also be worth the most in terms of income, so this is going to be a highly contested area. In this area, there will be new architecture, which is inspired by a Northern European look, like huts and yurts. I think this is going to look really, really cool, especially in the atmosphere of Edengrove. Malevolence is now Solovolence. It's not actually getting renamed, it's just going to be a solo zone. Some of the current elite chests will still be there and the puzzles remain intact, but the bosses will be moved to their own arena southeast of Malevolence, close to Ziggurat's Grove. It's going to be interesting what this arena will be about, but yeah, sounds exciting overall. On the PvP side of things, we get some pretty significant news. First of all, forts are back to having a lock. Now, if a fort is claimed, it will be locked for 1 hour with a timer on the map, so you can only contest it once per hour. I think this is generally a better system. Factions will have a new faction tier with new rewards, and the biggest part here, Influence V2. Now, I will say that this is the part that I am most skeptical about, because they need to get this right, and I am not 100% sure if that has happened. We've got a lot of very positive things in this expansion so far that I've talked about, but I'm not sure if they will be able to nail this. So I will tell you what their current plans are. They want to do 3 scheduled influence races in different territories per day. I conceptually like that a lot more than the current system, but it also makes me wonder what kind of safeguards they have for one company owning most of the map, because double declaring seems exponentially more difficult under this, unless there are specific safety switches that put it on the same company if a company owns multiple territories, so it makes it more likely to double declare. Didn't get explained, unfortunately. This influence race will have a scheduled 45-minute duration, and you will be able to capture 3 different capture points plus the fort during this time frame and contest them. So there's 4 different hot zones throughout the zone. Each capture point you own gives you a consistent trickle of influence. Additionally, they also boost the influence you earn from missions. They are also updating PvP missions to be a little bit closer to the towers / watches / capture points, so the areas where all of that is going down. Influence races will be very well rewarded. You get a lot of Azoth Salt and a lot of PvP reward track, and keep in mind this is going to be very important, especially because certain artifacts will be on the PvP reward track. War will happen no matter if you win or lose, as long as a faction has earned any influence. The faction with the most influence gets to declare, and I think that is the same gambling system that it currently is as well. They say they have a lot of knobs and dials that they can turn, and they will pay close attention. I wish they would have talked about this more or shown us more, because there's a lot left to be questioned here. With the information that we have so far, I am really hoping that the primary influence push here will be these capture points, and these capture points in themselves will be interesting as well. They say they're towers, so that sounds better than just, an empty area, but we'll see about that. And then I'm very concerned that they just kind of said, yeah, we kind of moved the locations for faction missions, but didn't say anything about what they're going to do with faction missions. Because I absolutely despise the current version of faction missions where you're just running back and forth, picking up random stuff, standing in random areas, and I know that there's a massive complaint of many players, especially those who are consistently running wars and have to do this stuff over and over, because the activities are so mundane that some people literally had bots running them for them. PvP related activities should be fun stuff that encourages more PvP and not chores, and I really hope they figure out a way to do that. Last but not least, about PTR, they said as soon as it's ready we'll put it up, and it should be soon. It will be a very short PTR, previously at 3 to 5 weeks. That's not going to be the case here. They said it's going to be one time for a limited time and shutting down ahead of release. The goal here is likely to keep the content more fresh and avoid too many spoilers. We're just going to have to pray that it's not going to be too buggy. Shortly after the PTR there will also be a Q&A. I have an interesting last side note for you, but first a reminder, if you enjoyed the video, then consider subscribing and clicking the bell so you get notified of all the other info about the expansion and everything surrounding it that will come out over the next days. Also again, if you'd like to support me further and get early trading tips, then consider hopping over to my Patreon. Thanks to all my patrons who already did exactly that. So this last bit that is interesting to me is that they were in Seattle for this show, whereas normally they're in a different location, and I'm not quite sure what that means. They kind of just said it at the start and said, hey, isn't this cool? But normally, as far as I know, most of the team for New World is in Irvine, and I don't know if the shows were always filmed in Irvine anyways, I don't think so. But either way, I'm wondering if this means that there's going to be a general move of the studio, which would obviously be very interesting. Currently, the New World related job offers are still for Irvine, but obviously moving everything over there would be a long process anyways. Maybe it is too difficult to find people in the tech field in California because it's so contested and also so expensive to live, so maybe this is a strategic move. Again, we don't know, we didn't get any details, maybe we'll learn more in the future. For now, thanks for watching, SLOTH out.